Hey folks, welcome back to Uncivilized Games. I will, as always, be your host, Dan, here today to give you my thoughts on indie tabletop RPGs. Today's specimen is Penumbra City, a World of Harrow game by Inman Neruin and published by Tangled Wilderness. If you're new here, consider hitting that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss out on any of our new videos. Now, this game, it's a good time. It's filled with anarchist knights, mushroom-fueled berserkers, and yes, everyone's favorite, psychic kids controlling swarms of rats. Get comfy, but not too comfy. It pays to stay alert on the cold, dusted streets of Penumbra City. Now, we'll hit the setting and mechanics shortly, but first, let's do a quick recap on the character classes, because you and I both know when you crack open an RPG book, they're the first thing you look for. What can I play in this world? So, first up we have the Clackers. They're mad bombers and hackers who tinker with difference engines in the sewers. They're chaotic, explosive, and just a blast to play. Their standout ability? Bomb Buddies. Adorable little mobile explosives that they learn to modify for all kinds of uses as they level up. Next are the Corsorian Knights. They're anarchist knights who gain strength, both literal and figurative, from following their personal tenets. And they have a link to smugglers from their homeland. They're your frontline tanks. They soak up damage, they fight for the revolution against the God Kings. Their standout ability is that they enter a trance in combat that makes them absolutely terrifying to face down, and all but unstoppable. The Dog Girls. They ride custom motorcycles called Dog's Wheels, acting as scouts with incredible mobility. They're not just speedsters, though. They know someone everywhere, making them absolutely invaluable for social interactions. And as they level up, they become ever more capable scouts and Dog's Wheel riders. Then there's the ex-Marines. Those are former soldiers clad in power armor that they really were supposed to hand back when they left their platoons. Now, hunted by the armed forces that they once fought for, they use their brute strength and the firepower of their exoskeletons to aid the people of Penumbra City. They can literally add more gun to a gun, which makes them pretty heavy hitters in combat. There's the Fungalians. They're barbarian street poets who use mushrooms to enter battle frenzies. They can also fascinate and control crowds through their alien poetry, all the while using mushrooms to induce violent battle rages in themselves. As they level up, they learn all kinds of interesting ways to use their mushrooms on themselves and others. No, I will not make a fun guy pun. Now, next we have the Gas Lampers. They're upper middle class revolutionaries on horseback. Surprisingly versatile. They excel both in combat ability and in building coalitions. They're silver-tongued, suave motherfuckers, and they can charm anyone into just about anything. And if it comes down to a fight, you'd better hope they don't make it to their horses, because they're deadly on horseback. Now, the Gunslingers. Well, they're supposed to be expert marksmen, absolutely deadly with their pistols and rifles while being highly mobile on the battlefield, and natural engineers and wanderers outside of it, but we'll get into why this didn't quite hit the mark for me later on. The Labor Thugs. Those are parkour experts and master organizers. Think of them as monks who can just as easily mobilize a workforce as scale the city walls and break a few bones. They can turn literally anything into a weapon, including the same workforce that they organize and inspire. Lordlings. Lordlings are somewhat OP. They're rich kids dabbling in other classes. Now, if you've got a player who loves multi-classing, this is their playground. And they have a connection to family and society up in the floating city of Silver that can be quite useful to any budding revolutionaries. Now, the Occultists. Those are your wizards, delving into astral projection and communicating with the dead while cursing and hexing their enemies. Pretty cool in concept, but they bring some gameplay flow concerns which we'll address later on. Now, my personal favorite, the Patchworkers. I do love to play healers and support. They're healers who graft flesh using fungal magic and wield mycomantic vapors to achieve all kinds of effects. They're creepy, very stabby, and invaluable to any faction, which brings some pretty unique role-playing opportunities. And finally, the Rat Kings. Psychic kids who use mycomancy and their own strange gifts to control swarms of rats. What more do you want me to say? They're deeply weird, several kinds of creepy, and they're absolutely fantastic. Alright, let's talk about the world in which you can find these assorted freaks and weirdos. Penumbra City, a character in itself. Imagine a sprawling metropolis shrouded in coal dust, technology that's a blend of steampunk and early electrics, and a floating city called the Silver, looming overhead, casting literal shadows over the populace. That city's in rough shape. It's war-torn, it's oppressed by the God King Ath, and teetering on the edge of revolution. There's a palpable tension in the air, and the game does an excellent job of immersing you in that gritty environment. What's really cool, though, is how the game handles technology and magic. You've got airships, radio towers, even mechanical tanks powered by coal. Then there's magic, hermeticism, mycomancy, which add layers of depth to the world. Hermeticism messes with the barriers between realms, angels, demons, and more, while mycomancy involves using mushrooms for all sorts of weird and wonderful effects, from healing to entering battle frenzies with the Fungalians. Now, let's get to the grit of it, the mechanics. Penumbra City uses a D20 roll-under system focused on 4 core stats: strength, speed, will, and knowledge. Pretty streamlined and keeps the gameplay flowing. Character progression, on the other hand, is a bit of a mixed bag in my opinion. On the one hand, characters start off quite capable, loaded with unique abilities that make you feel integral to the world right from the get-go. On the other hand, when you level up, you have to roll to see if you improve your ability scores or gain new proficiencies. If you fail those rolls, you don't get the improvements. Personally, I find this approach can be a bit disheartening because leveling up to me should feel rewarding, not like a gamble. That said, the game shines in how it handles tools and equipment. Weapons and other items aren't just differentiated by damage, but also by unique properties, depending on their quality level. For example, higher quality knives can bypass armor when you catch an opponent off guard, and clubs can have a crushing property that always bypasses 1 armor point. It adds a tactical layer to the otherwise pretty rules-light combat that's really engaging. One of the standout features is the game's emphasis on faction reputation and coalition building. Your interactions with the various factions aren't just for storytelling. They have real mechanical benefits. There's 3 major factions in the game. The Revolutionists. They're a ragtag coalition of assorted groups who may not have much in common, but they all agree that having a God King in charge who controls everything is kind of a bad idea. They include groups such as the Areni Foundation, who are artists and organizers who distribute soup to anyone who needs it down in the plaza, and the Industrial Workers of Harrow, the IWH, who stand together for the rights of their members against the oppression of the Silver City above. The next faction is the Bulwark. These are your conservative groups. They're trying to uphold the status quo and lick the boots of the Church of Ath and the God King. They've got the Royal Army, and of course, the Church of Ath themselves, whose offerings of magical bread and healing for the pious comes from a pretty horrifying source. To the private army of the King beneath the King, known as the Gloaming, which patrols the entrances to the underworld in the city below. And finally, you've got your centrists, who call themselves the Reasonable. These are the folks who just want the others to stop fighting, preferably while leaving them in a comfortable position once the dust clears. From capitalist scoundrels such as the Lords of the New Order, to youth gangs just trying to get by trading information on the streets such as the Skips. This loose faction covers some pretty wide ground. Now, the game provides detailed breakdowns of services and equipment that you can access based on your reputation level with each group and faction, whether it's gaining access to the clacker networks of difference engines or calling in favors from the Areni Federation and the Soup people in the plaza. There are real, tangible rewards for investing in your relationships and building your coalition, which really opens the door for players to attempt ever greater feats of rebellion against the forces from above. This mechanic aligns perfectly with the game's themes of revolution and mutual aid. It encourages players to engage deeply with the world and see the impact of their actions, both big and small. Now, let's circle back to Magic because it's too fascinating, especially to me, to skip over. I mean, if you know me, you know I'm a sucker for a good Magic system, so keep in mind, the setting of this game is fantastic, not just in terms of quality, but in terms of genre. Magic exists, the supernatural is real, and despite the existence of electricity, steam-powered tech, and even radio, magic is still a thing. Even when the game introduces the concept of difference engines, a sort of steampunk computer system that's used by clackers that can range from portable machines to massive structures the size of pyramids, these devices are presented with a kind of prescience about the future that borders on, if not straight up crosses, the line into the mystical. Player characters who have access to magic, they can access, if you're an occultist, you're born entertainer who can perform seances and tarot readings, and you have an ethereal connection that allows you to astrally project, speak with the dead, cast various curses and hexes in and out of combat, and even have a familiar. Who doesn't love a familiar? There's also Mycomancy, practiced mainly by Fungalians and patchworkers. By consuming mushrooms, preparing tinctures and vapors out of them, or turning them into fungal paste and spreading it on donated patches of human skin. These classes can achieve all kinds of effects, buffing themselves and others, harming and hurting their enemies, going into strange myconid trances, and healing terrible wounds, though not without leaving a mark. Then there's the even darker side of magic, like the Hands of God up in the City of Silver, who perform seraphic healing. They drag angels out of the ether, sacrifice them, and use that power to heal. It's considered the most acceptable manner of magical healing amongst the higher classes of Silver. Of course. The Undercity is another cool as hell aspect of the weirdness and mystery of the setting. A dangerous place filled with all kinds of monsters, forgotten magical technology, and the remnants of past civilizations, as well as signs of current habitation by strange mushrooms that walk, talk, think, and sing. It's the perfect setting for dungeon delving and uncovering hidden truths about the city and the god kings we're fighting. The game doesn't skimp on enemies either, from the horrifying beasts of Hern, vivisected half-animal, half-human monsters, to gelatinous cubes repurposed as the street cleaners that dissolve the homeless. These foes, they're both creative and terrifying, and that's not even counting the monsters of a more human persuasion. Each enemy type comes with its own lore and mechanical nuances. For example, there's angels and demons that add a celestial and infernal layer to the game, making higher level threats feel genuinely epic. And you know what they say, it takes a village to bring down a brutal fascistic regime. Now, no game is perfect, and Penumbra City is no exception. My main gripe is with the Gunslinger class. While the game provides a rich variety of melee weapons with unique properties and exciting abilities for the other classes, the Gunslinger's progression feels underdeveloped. Firearms in the game are limited, and they lack the depth found in some of the other weapons. They have a higher chance of breaking. They don't offer much in terms of unique gameplay other than just being able to hit people from far away. Compared to the explosive fun of the clackers or the mobility of the dog girls, Gunslingers just don't measure up, especially as they advance. All their growth and advancement comes from what feels like small incremental improvements or modifications to their pistols and rifles. None of them having the flavor and interesting mechanics found in the advancement options for almost any of the other classes. I may be missing something. Not having played out combat with that class, it may be that ranged weapons are inherently just far more powerful and therefore don't need much modification. But where other classes are gaining interesting and fanciful abilities with each level up, requiring me to reach level 3 and spend an advance to simply affix a knife to the tip of my rifle just feels underwhelming. I was also a bit concerned about the occultist's astral projection abilities. While cool in concept, it could potentially sideline other players during sessions as the occultist embarks on solo journeys into the ether. Think of other games where one character's defining mechanic is effectively its own separate world and minigame, like hacking in Shadowrun. While this is an issue that can be handled by a skilled GM, it's something to keep in mind. While you always want your players to get to do the cool thing that their character class allows them to do, in this case, astrally project and view the past, speak with the dead, and more, you need to be careful not to let such uses entirely sideline the rest of the group that can't follow the occultist into the ether. Despite these hiccups, Penumbra City is a gem of a game. Its rich setting, emphasis on community and revolution, and unique character classes make it stand out among the games that I've gathered over the years. The game excels in creating an atmosphere that's both oppressive and hopeful, encouraging players to become agents of change in a world that desperately needs it. The mechanics support the narrative, providing tools for coalition building and meaningful interactions with the world. So, would I recommend Penumbra City? Absolutely. If you're looking for a game that combines gritty steampunk aesthetics with deep social mechanics and a dash of the bizarre, this one's for you. Just be prepared to homebrew a bit if someone wants to play a gunslinger, and keep an eye on how occultist abilities play out at your table. Now, thanks for joining me on this deep dive into Penumbra City. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you played it? What classes interest you the most? Drop a comment below and let's get that conversation going. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps out the channel. And coming up next, we'll be exploring Gun and Slinger, a game that puts a unique spin on the gunslinger archetype and might wash away the bad taste of the gunslinger class in this game. So it's got a really high weirdness quotient, it's got talking guns, a whole lot more. Trust me, you're not gonna want to miss that, so be sure to subscribe. And until next time, keep rolling those dice, keep weaving those stories. Remember, the revolution starts at your gaming table. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.